Hello, BookTube. I've got a few more new arrivals for you, books that were opened off camera but that might still be of interest to you. I thought we'd go through them together. Unfortunately, you don't have the bean up on her perch. It's just too hot up there. It's a hot, humid day, 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 85% humidity, just a beastly day. And she has chosen to lay down on her cat bed directly in front of the box fan on the floor. I'm assuming that's more comfortable for her. I'm not going to gainsay her in this weather. You'll just have to imagine her. That's all. You've got Superman to carry you through. But I thought we'd go through some of these new arrivals, not as many as yesterday, but I wanted you to know they were out there. And we'll start with a bound galley here that it isn't anything like what the book is going to look like. I'm assuming that means that this is well in advance. Yeah, this comes out in late September. This is by Mallory Wyckoff, and it's called God Is. Rather nice design, rather good. That's what it'll look like, but it won't be this. It won't be just bound pages. Mallory Wyckoff, teacher, preacher, writer, and spiritual director, takes readers on a journey of more, with the capital M, in her new book, God Is. This is not to be confused with a self-published book that's been making the round on anti-Christian channels, on atheist channels, by what's his name? Armando Calvo wrote a self-published book that has been roasted to hell and back by, I shouldn't say anti-Christian channels because they're not anti-Christian, atheist channels. People have ordered copies of his self-published piece of crap book and roasted every word of it. This has the same title, but it's a far more professional thing. This is coming out from Erdman's, which wouldn't take Armando Calvo on a bet. Wyckoff explores feminine and untapped language and metaphors for God. Some biblical and familiar, others less well known, but all revelatory of a God who is more than we've been allowed to imagine. She offers up her own spiritual journey to encourage readers to reconsider their small view of God and of themselves. And her quote is, "I've set out to write about the expansiveness of God because there are too many energies that resist that notion, that seek to keep God and humanity small. It's as if many believe that one image of God is sufficient, capable of holding all that we are and all that we will be, able to contain all that God is. But my reality has never reflected that." Pretty interesting thinking. I'll read a book by someone who's making that contention. That is a good contention. Wyckoff's lyrical prose, full of her humor and wide range of experiences, pulls readers into a new way of looking at God and the many expressions of the divine. So I'm all for it. This comes out in September. I won't read it until September, but I wanted to let you know that it's out there in case it ends up being really good. Those of you, you Christians out there, certainly, or who are listening to me, I'm sure will agree with me that the number of Christianity-related books that comes out in any publishing season that's actually intelligent and not, sexist, racist, science-denying, hogwash garbage, reactionary, Macomb, Georgia revival tent nonsense. That's kind of weird, revanchist, hateful Christianity that's made gigantic celebrities out of a handful of hate preachers. There are billions of Christians out there in the world who don't. That is not their faith. Their faith makes them better. It makes the world better. Their faith is a wonderful, beautiful thing. And I know that there are a lot of Christians out there who do not find that faith reflected in some of the books that come out. They might look for it, but they don't often find it. If this turns out to be one of those books, I will sing it from the rooftops because I also look for those books. Then we'll do a little bit of nature writing. Let's see, when does this come out? Okay, this comes out on August 4th. This is right around the corner. This is from the University of Chicago Press. This is the Sloth Lemurs Song by Allison Richard. And it is a book about Madagascar. Let's see here. Madagascar is a place of change. A biodiversity hotspot and the fourth largest island on the planet, it has been home to a spectacular parade of animals, from giant flightless birds and giant tortoises on the ground to agile lemurs leaping through the treetops. Some species live on. Many have vanished in the distant or recent past. Over vast stretches of time, Madagascar's forests have expanded and contracted in response to shifting climates, and the hand of people is clear in changes during the last 1,000 years or so. Today, Madagascar is a microcosm of global trends. What happens there in the decades ahead can perhaps suggest ways to help turn the tide on the environmental crisis now sweeping the world. So this is all about Madagascar, sort of an environmental look and maybe a love letter, depending on how experienced the author is, to Madagascar. Great, fantastic. So I just wanted to let you know that this comes out in right away. This comes out just days away. Any of you who know Madagascar, who've traveled or visited there, might want to put this book on your list. We have an oddity. This is an oddity. Do I have a sheet for this? Maybe not. No, I don't have a sheet for this, but it's an oddity. You film buffs out there are probably going to want to know about it. You probably do already. And maybe those of you out there who are fond of weird books, weird, uncategorizable things will also want to know about this. And maybe it will fall under the heading of Garbagus. I haven't read it yet. I'll find out. This is by Michael Mann. I think that belongs in very heavy air quotes. And Meg Gardner, who I suspect did the lion's share of the work on this. And this is Heat 2. A novel, as you can see on the cover, this is a novel sequel of a movie that came out in 1988, directed by Michael Mann. So, let's see what this is. Let's see what we have here. One day after the end of Heat, the movie, one day after the movie ended in 1988, Chris Sherhillis is holed up in a Koreatown, wounded, half delirious, and desperately trying to escape L.A. Hunting him is LAPD detective Vincent Hanna. Hours earlier, Hanna killed Sherhillis' brother in arms, Neil McCauley, in a gunfight under the strobe lights at the foot of the LAX runway. Now Hanna's determined to capture and kill Sherhillis, the last survivor of McCauley's crew, before he ghosts out of the city. In 1988, 7 years earlier, McCauley, Sherhillis, and their Highline crew are taking scores on the West Coast, the U.S.-Mexican border, and now in Chicago. Driven, daring, they're pulling in money and living vivid lives. And Chicago homicide detective Vincent Hanna, a man unreconciled with his history, is following his calling and pursuit of armed and dangerous men into the dark and wild places, hunting an ultraviolet gang of home invaders. Meanwhile, the fallout of McCauley's scores and Hanna's pursuit causes unexpected repercussions in a parallel narrative driving through the years following Heat. Heat 2 projects its dimensional and richly drawn men and women into whole new worlds, from the inner sanctums of the rival crime syndicates in South America, Tree-Frayed Zone, to transnational criminal enterprises in Southeast Asia. The novel brings you intimately into these lives. In Michael Mann's Heat universe, they will confront new adversaries and lethal circumstances beyond all boundaries. So this is a novel sequel to a movie that came out in 1988 and was seen by 10 people. And what I want to know is, has anything like this ever happened before? Where a novel is greenlit for an old movie, but the novel is a sequel to the movie, but there is no new movie. It'd be one thing, I would understand if there was a novelization that came my way of Top Gun Maverick. Because the sequel came out decades after the original, but the sequel is in movie theaters and is the #1 movie in the world and has been for quite some time. It's made billions of dollars. There, I would understand. Has anything like this ever happened before that maybe I just don't know about? Cinemaphiles will probably know better than book people will, but I don't have a sheet on this. I don't have any dates on it, but I'm putting it on the list. I think first, as painful as it is, I'm probably going to have to watch the movie. Right? I don't remember the details of how Heat ended back in 1988 when I hadn't even been born yet. I'll probably have to watch the movie first and then read this thing. I don't know. Are any of you out there Michael Mann fans? If you are, you're going to want to know that this is coming. And if there's a Michael Mann super fan out there who really wants this copy, I'll be happy to send it to you, provided you live in the United States. I'll be happy to do that. I'm obviously not a Michael Mann super fan. I loved his adaptation of Thomas Harris's Red Dragon, Manhunter. I thought that had really stylish moments to it, but otherwise, no. So if you're a super fan, you probably need this book more than I do. Let's move on here. This we don't want this to take all day. What is this next one? Do I have a sheet for it? No, I do not. Okay. Well, since I don't have a pub sheet, I don't know when this is coming out, but it's a finished copy, so probably soon. This is by Daniel Selmy, and it's called Dawn at Middle King Valley, the Sierra Club, the Disney Company, and the Rise of Environmental Law. And there you have the Badlands with a deer. So what have we got here? In our current age of climate change-induced panic, it's hard to imagine a time when private groups were not actively enforcing environmental protection laws in the courts. It wasn't until 1972, however, that a David and Goliath-esque Supreme Court showdown involving the Sierra Club and Disney set a revolutionary legal precedent for the era of environmental activism we live in today. Set against the backdrop of the environmental movement that swept the country in the late 1960s and early 70s, this book tells the surprising story of how the U.S. Forest Service, the Disney Company, and the Sierra Club each struggled to adapt to a new, rapidly changing political landscape of environmental consciousness and post-war America. Proposed in 1965 and approved by the federal government in 1969, Disney's vast development plan would have irreversibly altered the practically untouched Mineral King Valley, a magnificently beautiful alpine area in the Sierra Nevada mountains. At first, the plan met with unanimous approval from elected officials, government administrators, and the press. It seemed inevitable that this expanse of wild natural land would be radically changed and turned over to a private corporation. Then the scrappy Sierra Club forcefully pushed back with a lawsuit that ultimately propelled the modern environmental era by allowing interest groups to bring litigations against environmentally destructive projects. And back then, in the early 1970s, there were a lot of articles about environmental health, and a friend back then was adamant in saying, it's not a big freeze. It's not a new ice age that's coming. It's a big warm-up. The factors are already in place. Unless we change the way we're doing business, unless we change the way we regulate industry and the auto industry and whatnot, we are going to create a greenhouse gas nightmare. And that friend said, the people in the 2200s, so 2201, 2215, will be paying the price. And he was off by 100 years. We're paying the price now. Half the world's on fire. I do not know the details of this lawsuit at all. I don't know anything about it. This will be fascinating. I don't know when it comes out, but now you know Dawn at Middle King Valley is coming out. It might be of more interest to you than it is to me. And then we'll finish up with more natural history. Only this isn't about a place, it's about an animal. This is by Jack Ashby, and it's called Platypus Matters, the extraordinary story of Australian mammals. How beautiful. A lovely design there. I don't think I have a sheet for this. No, I don't. All right. So I don't know when this is coming out. I'm assuming these are all August books. But any of you, if one of you has the platypus as your spirit animal, you're going to want to get this book on your list, get your library to get it. Think of the platypus. They lay eggs that hatch into so-called platypups, produce milk without nipples, and venom without fangs, and they can detect electricity. Or a wombat. Their teeth never stop growing, they poop cubes, and they defend themselves with reinforced rear ends. And what about antikynuses? Tiny marsupial carnivores whose males don't see their first birthday as their frenzied sex lives take so much energy that their immune systems fail. Doctors are worried about that in my case as well, when I was a young antitynus. Platypuses, possums, wombats, kindas, devils, kangaroos, quolls, dibblers, dunarts, quawaries. Australia has some truly astonishing mammals with incredible unfamiliar features. How does that world regard these creatures? And what does that mean for their conservation? In this book, the author naturalist Jack Ashby shares his love for these often misunderstood animals, informed by his own experiences meeting living marsupials and egg-laying mammals during fieldwork in Tasmania and mainland Australia, as well as his work with thousands of zoological specimens collected for museums over the last 200 plus years. The author's tale not only explains historical mysteries and debunks myths, especially about the platypus, but also reveals the toll these myths can take. And this is a standard work of popular natural history, so it's got an inset of color photos that show you not only what I presume is the author's beloved platypus, but also, yes, what is it called? An echidna? This is the author's first encounter with one of when he was just a young geek instead of what I presume is the older geek that he is today. Okay, and also historical stuff. You've also got historical stuff. There's a lot, I think there's a lot that's known about historical but now extinct animals on Tasmania, including the Tasmanian wolf, which I know lived long enough to have a picture taken of it. Yes, okay, there we go. This is the thiasolene, which is a marsupial dog of one kind or another. I don't know that I could talk to these creatures. Well, I'll never know. They're all gone now. Although, those of you in Australia, I'm assuming that there are persistent rumors that thiasolene still exists. Is that right? I would assume so, that would be the case. I don't think there's any evidence. But I bet there's a flourishing subculture that says they're still around. But anyway, how can you resist, right? How can you resist learning everything there is to know about platypuses and their platypups? So once again, I don't know the date on this, but you now know that it's coming out, and you can go to your library or your bookstore and either order it or lobby for them to get it at your library. So there you go. Not nearly as many new arrivals this time. We have Platypus Matters, Dawn at Mineral King Valley, about a pioneering eco-law case. We have Heat 2 by, heavy air quotes, Michael Mann and Meg Gardner. I'd be willing to bet that Michael Mann never saw even so much as a single page of this book's manuscript, but I could be wrong. He could be the one exception in the history of humankind. The Sloth Lemurs Song, which is, again, natural history, but it's about Madagascar. So it'll have Madagascarian animals, but it's mainly about the place. And finally, God Is, which I don't have an actual book to show you. Sort of an expansive look at, where we find the godhood and how we define it. Those are just a handful of new arrivals, so that this video doesn't go on for 30 minutes, and so you don't have an endless parade of titles that I thought might be of interest to you. So that's all for now. I'm going to wrap this up. Mighty hot and humid here today, and with no relief in sight. Mid-August, before there's any relief from this weather. So I'm gonna wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.